Hafaday, I'm Ryan with Pinpoint Guam Real Estate. Today we're going to be speaking with an old friend of mine. His name is Shoja Rezvani, and Shoja is going to be talking to us about the construction industry on Guam and his experience in the construction industry, and also his current venture, which is called A&R Pacific. And A&R Pacific does precast, and that's one of the reasons I asked him to come on, because precast is one of the solutions that's being used to address the housing problem on Guam. Specifically housing on base behind the fence, but also we're looking at it outside the fence and how it can be deployed for attainable housing for the rest of us, I guess you would say. So Shoja has a lot of interesting insights because he's done stuff at scale. He's worked for one of the largest construction companies on Guam and has done significant projects from airplane hangars to 100-unit subdivisions. So he has practical on-site experience on Guam for the last, 10, 15 years. So you're going to enjoy what he has to say. Shoja, welcome. Thanks for agreeing to be on our podcast and helping us answer some of these questions related to construction on Guam. And so the way I wanted to start out is, off record, we were just kind of talking about something that you said to somebody. You effectively called somebody who was new to the industry a puppy.
I didn't know you want to bring that up.
Well, I mean, they're not from here, so we won't name any names. But to set the table, Shoja and I were looking at a product and seeing its suitability for Guam. And the person pitching the product, had certain ideas about executing in the field. And after the call, I asked Shoja what he thought, and he said, "This guy's a puppy," meaning he doesn't know what he doesn't know, right? And I appreciated that because of who you are. And so can you tell us about kind of who you are, where you have the clout, where you would call someone a puppy, and I would say I would immediately understand that yes, Shoja is right. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I've been in the industry since '96. I finished my undergrad in '95, and then in Iran, and I'm a licensed engineer in Iran, and then moved to Canada. I did my master's degree in structural engineering in Canada, in Toronto, and then moved to California in early 2000. I've been involved. I started my career as an engineer for a consulting firm. So I used to do heavy calculations and computer modeling, computer analysis. So very familiar, very comfortable with, doing analysis and seeing through how you're going to get the structure work. And that helps me even today with what I do as a contractor because, I know the building code. I'm licensed in different countries, different states, very familiar with international building code. And then I was the guy who used to read code every day and then refer to it, check it, make sure and get yourself up to date with the building code and make sure you follow the latest as needed in different regions and different countries. So, and then in 2010, I got offered to come to Guam, and I moved to Guam and lived here ever since. But in the short, brief story, that's how I ended up where I am. So,
okay. So, what brought you to Guam initially?
So at the time was Watts Constructors. They needed a senior project manager for Naval Hospital. And then I was brought up to Guam to build that. And I was the only senior project manager for the job. And then we finished that. And then we were supposed to be here for 2 years. And then kind of one after the other, then we stayed. And that's how I ended up coming to Guam. We finished that hospital. And then we had more projects. And I ended up becoming the general manager for Guam operations, and then in 2021, they decided to leave Guam, and we stayed. So
I see. So when you say hospital, you mean GRMC?
No, Naval Hospital.
Naval Hospital. So you built Naval Hospital.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So what else have you done in terms of projects on Guam?
We have many projects with Watts. We have done many projects. We have done munition igloos. We have done aircraft hangars. We have done warehouses. We did housing. We did North Tipalau housing in Navy base. 3 phases of that. That was all precast homes. We did the water wells, Maui water well. Also different projects.
Right. So when you say puppy, you've done projects at scale of significance at every level, right? To include housing. So I understand what you're saying. So tell me about that. Tell me about how your journey on Guam over kind of peak years of what we call like the buildup has kind of informed your experience of the local ecosystem here.
Yeah. So obviously Guam is very unique in construction just because you're in a remote area away from everything else. And then you need a lot of pre-planning in getting yourself ready for the job. That's part of the problem, or not the problem, part of the construction. The other part is you have to understand the local needs and know local conditions. I used to live in California, we don't have typhoons. So in Guam, in the middle of construction, you have a typhoon coming, so you have to be ready for it. So it has its own unique conditions. And then the labor market in Guam, we all know there's a shortage of labor. So you need to understand how you can or where you can bring labor to fix that issue. And then in the project management, you're dealing with local resources, very limited, and you have to bring from outside. And not everyone wants to come to Guam. That's very obvious. So then you look internationally, you look at different countries, and then you have to understand the visa process. So there's a lot of, it makes it more exciting doing construction in Guam because it's more challenging. If you're up to challenge, this is a place to be at. Every day is different.
I spent a lot of time recently, reading about the entrepreneur or listening to stuff about the entrepreneur's journey about doing hard things. That's where growth comes from. So
pain of growth.
So that's your message. Your message to the world is come to Guam, do hard things, and grow.
If you like it, some people don't like it. Some people are stressed out. Some people don't know how to do it. Some people don't want to do it. I'm happy to, it just depends what you want and what you're up to, right? So, but if you like someone that up to challenge and you want to, challenge yourself, then that's, I guess, the problem. It's a good thing to do in Guam construction.
Well, I mean, is it? That's a good segue into kind of my next question, right? I mean, it's a cyclical industry, right? So there's an ebb and flow. There was a time where it was very challenging to be in construction because you couldn't source the labor.
Yeah.
And there was a time where it was very difficult to have an ongoing concern in construction because there was no work, I would think, right? So what has that been like, and how has that informed your experience? Because now you are not with Contract Watts. You've gone off on your own, and now you're in precast, right? Tell me about what you're doing now.
So in 2021, when Watts left and I resigned, and my wife and we started A&R Pacific, which is a general contractor, and then we did get a job with GWA, and then Watts Constructors, Contract Watts later, they had a precast yard in Santa Rita, and they were going to dismantle it. So it was an opportunity. I talked to them. I took ownership of that. And then we created a second company called ART Constructors. So with ART Constructors, we do private or military precast buildings. With A&R Pacific, we do general contracting.
I see. Oh, so you do it all, but you're focusing on rapid build as well because of what you're doing inside the fence right now.
Yeah.
So tell me about what you're doing for outside the fence development.
Outside the fence, we do work a lot with the government agencies. We have done projects with Port of Authority, Guam Port. We have done projects with GWA. We have done private works, depends, there is a huge demand out there right now for all sort of different things because all the contractors are busy with military construction. not everyone wants to take the local government of Guam projects. So there is a demand, and there's some of them are kind of a little bit more complicated than average projects. So, I like to do both. I mean, I think it's interesting sometimes to do different things, right? So not
Right.
military related.
Well, so one of the most significant problems that we have outside the fence is attainable housing.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways you've thought to solve that problem is with precast. So tell me about your approach with precast.
Yeah, so precast is something I've been involved for 26 years now, and so it's as you know, is a prefabricated concrete product. It comes in different shapes and forms. It's very popular in United States, in Canada, different places. Has its own limitations. If you want to do in Guam, we don't do a lot of, I call it fancy precast. In the States, we used to do a lot of very complicated structures with precast. But in Guam, we just stay with the basics. But when it comes to the low income or housing problem in Guam, we know Guam conditions with the tornadoes or typhoons and, the humidity. And then, everyone loves concrete. And then, so the solution was to come up with something that it works and then is concrete. So you can get insurance, you can get mortgage, and it's something is fast. So precast kind of checks all those boxes. You produce concrete in a factory setting, so the quality is kind of monitored. And then with precast, you do repetitions. You repeat one piece over and over, so that brings a cost. And then, and it's, like I said, it's concrete, so everyone likes it. It would last longer. And then it's much, 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 much faster. What we trying to do right now is what our solution cuts down time a lot. So considering, the typical construction of the CMU blocks or cast in place, our solution is much faster than that.
In this episode, we talk about precast as being a solution to Guam's attainable housing problem. And one of the reasons it's a solution is because we looked at the data and we see it saves time. And at Pinpoint, we lead with data and we aggregate the data that you need to solve your real estate problems. If you need help solving your real estate problem, please give us a call. We're happy to help.
Yep, that's the one.
Shoja, you've talked about precast and how it's a viable solution, and one of the ways it's viable is because of how quickly it deploys, right? So talk to me about that. Talk to me about how precast is different from traditional construction.
Yeah, so right now we are contracted to do 2 homes and an apartment complex using our system. And let's say for the typical single-level house, a 4-bedroom house, it would take you, 12 to 18 months to build it, complete house. And then the shell and the foundation would take you anywhere from 4 to 6 months, depends who does it, if you find labor that's available. So with our system, it would take, so the house, a 4-bedroom house, will consist of 9 blocks, 9 modules. It would take us 9 working days to produce it, let's say 2 weeks, and then you have a couple more weeks for foundation and a couple days to install it, so you can have the whole thing, the shell installed and fabricated and installed in a month. So you're cutting down 4 to 6 months to 1 month. And then that would be produced in Santa Rita, in our yard, and then we would truck it to the site, and then we install it. Obviously, there are some connections and some details that you have to follow, but yeah. And then the shell is as such that you just paint it and you seal it, obviously for rain and water, and then you paint it and it's done. And it's just that's the difference. And is produced in the factory setting, so you don't need to worry about the quality as far as the the concrete, the strengths and issues, the placing of the concrete, and that's what we're trying to say. If you want to build a home, spend 6 months to do the shell with the timber and then construction and rains, you have to stop and this and that. or you wanna spend a month. And I met so many architects and the owners, and they all love that. So we got the mold. I redesigned the mold, and we got the mold, and we are in the permit process for our first 4-bedroom homes, and then hopefully in a couple of months we'll be up.
So you say you have molds, meaning you can do various floor plans with the various molds that you have in stock on premise.
Correct. Yeah, we have developed like a standard plans from suite to 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom plans. Mm-hmm. So so we're talking about costs, right? So the idea is to have plans prepared, and then you can whoever the client would select one of those, and we can actually make those blocks ahead of time, and with minor changes that could be to speed up the process. If we get to the point that the blocks are already made and you want a 4-bedroom home, you just go pick 9 blocks, put it in a trailer, and just send it to the site. It basically is like a Lego, concept, but the Legos are 30 ton to 40 ton a piece. Legos are very heavy Legos. That you need to know what you're doing.
When we talk, I like to compare you to IKEA, right? Because IKEA has like kind of mix and match parts, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have, let's say, the Trofast, and the Trofast has a certain set of legs.
Yeah.
But that goes for like the, I don't know, whatever, 5 different names, the Cuckoo Bon or whatever. Yeah. Anyways, so, but with that, right? So in theory, if I had vacant land, I could call you up and say, "Hey, I want the Trofast
I want Model B."
Yeah, Model B, right? And you'll say, "Okay," and then it gets delivered to my site, and then assembled, and then you take it the rest of the way. Who does the finishing work? Because the walls aren't done when you're done, right?
Walls they are metal form inside and outside, so technically, they need very, very minor cleanup. And then, when you do hollow block traditional construction in Guam, and you plaster it.
Okay.
So this would come out as plastered wall.
Right.
So basically, you just have to clean it up, just paint it. If you want to do ferret or drywall it, you can. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about low-income housing or simple housing, you can literally paint over it and you're done.
Right. And so when we say low income, we mean, and we say attainable, meaning low cost, meaning it's ready to go right out of the box.
Yeah.
Because all the labor is put in when it's formed up and cured. And now it's just assembly on site, slap some paint on it, and you're done. Right?
Yeah.
One of the criticisms I've heard about precast is the topping and the leaking. Can you speak to me about that?
Yeah, so we do a lot of topping. We recommend topping, and the ones we have sold that we are in the design mode for those, we are going to place topping on it, and in my opinion, that's the best way for Guam environment, and then that would kind of seal everything together. But it's more complicated than just saying topping, how you treat the joint, because these are modular. So you have to have a right joint, flexible, so you won't crack the topping, and you have to have. I remember when we were doing North Tipala housing for Navy, I brought up the issue that there's some details needs to be relooked at, and they agreed to. So with precast, you need to always think about what can go wrong, and then as long as you have a right solution, they'll last forever. The precast is very popular in the States, especially in the West Coast, East Coast. We do a lot of more complicated projects there that, you never have any leakage issue. I mean, once in a while you need to maintain it. You need to have to inspect it, make sure the joints are sealed, or if you have any bad joint, repair it. But yeah, topping would be the best solution for Guam, concrete topping, yeah.
But you've had, you've been on Guam since 2010, right? So, and you've owned property here, and you've had construction experience, and you understand it. A lot of the existing construction here, in some of the more prominent or prolific subdivisions, is precast. Mm-hmm. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, no, we have a lot of precast structures out there right now. Just people don't know it just because they don't know the difference between the precast and non-precast. But because I've been in industry for many years, I can tell by just looking at it. So, Yeah.
And then also the criticism of precast is the inflexibility of design, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. Precast has its own limitations. If you, and especially in Guam, because we don't do, like I said before, we don't do fancy precast. If you have a lot of curvature, a lot of different shapes that with precast you want to have something that you repetitious and something that you can simplify. If you want to have a building that is very complicated and it has a lot of curvature, there's a lot of things are flying in and out of the structure, then probably as long I get calls all the time and people come to me, I want you to do this precast. I say, I love to sell you precast, but this is not the precast project. I mean, there are limitations, but you just have to look at it and say, okay, can I do this, correctly? Or, it does have some limitations, yes.
Yeah, but I think there's always trade-offs that you make.
Yeah.
And so that the trade-off in using precast is obviously the speed, right? Would you say that? What else would be the trade-off in terms of precast versus a traditional construction solution?
I would say speed. I would say quality. When you're building a house out of hollow block, and then how do you know all the hollows will be grouted and in this hollow block, the CMU block, and then the you can like in the typical construction, if you build a house out of hollow block, they typically go after it and chip all the walls out and put conduits in there.
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense, right? With what we do, the conduit will be inside the wall, and then you pour concrete over it. So that's more efficient. That saves you time, and you don't need to go chip out all the walls again, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then I for sure the quality is much greater, is more in controlled environment, and then. We talked about the speed. If you're a developer and you want to raise, you have invested money and then you want to put your money at use, right? You don't want to have your money sit there. So for an investor, that makes a lot of sense to have something that it can be executed much more quicker with the quality. And then what else I can bring it up? I think these are the and then with the Guam environment, you become more efficient with your labor, because labor is centralized in our yard, and that group of people can do 4, 5, 10 jobs in different days and different times. But if you have, let's say, if you have 5 projects outside, and you have each project has his own labor, so the use of the workforce is much more efficient.
Right. And so I see that, and so I guess how I see it, Shoja, is the speed is also an advantage to the people on Guam, and there's a lot of people on Guam who come into real estate through inheritance, and they inherit like a piece of land from a family member, and most people don't have the capacity to develop that land. And, just even the traditional setup for a construction loan, typically typical product is 18 months, right? You got to get your plans done, and you have to get your site work approved. You have to do all the testing and geotesting. There's a lot that comes with buying a property and building a house, right? And with that comes time, 18 months. And if you get financing, which most people have to, you have to carry that loan with your traditional housing expense through that whole development cycle from design, where you sign the engineer, to deployment. Every phase of construction, you have to pay everybody through the completion, right? And so you're carrying that, and that becomes an obstacle to ownership as well. And if you're not developing your own property, then what you're doing is you're buying a tract home in a large development, and that again is a problem for developers because of that long development cycle. So what you bring in rapidity is a solution to that, in terms of I can bring the product to market quickly, but then also for the small scale buyer, if you have 3 or 4 floor plans that permitting is used to dealing with, that makes it an easy solution. So the only variable you're dealing with is site work, and they can realize the same economies of scale that a tract home would, because you're doing all the work on site. So they just need to pick some of these precasted modules that you have sitting around in your yard and say, okay, put this together on my land. And then that becomes a viable housing solution. So that's really interesting. And that indicates like where the savings are effectively, right? You're realizing the equity of your own land. You're solving one of the issues, which is complexity of production and execution, and makes it accessible to the general public. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what it is. That's the plan. So
yeah. All right. So tell me about, so you've invested in this manufacturing capacity, right? Tell me about your ideal development scenario that, in terms of policy or access that would allow you to reach the most people in the shortest amount of time.
So the kind of different angles of looking at that, right? So one would be which is out of my capacity, would be the people having access to land. That some people, like you said, they have the land or they get inherited. Some people don't have the land, right? So having access to the land, having access to funding, obviously within reason, right? So that would be the second thing. And then the resources we have in Guam, right? So we obviously need to have concrete, we need to have some other material, the labor and things like that nature. So, which we managed to figure that out and over the years develop our own resources. But I guess I think the two important things are if we want to fix housing problem in Guam, I think is beyond me, but they have to look at how they can provide land to people that they need homes, or what would be the program, I don't know, and then the funding for it. So if those two are resolved, I think the us or other people, they can build homes, and that can solve Guam's problem. I mean, I love Guam, and Guam is a beautiful place, and that kind of bothers me. And that we want to provide something for people that it lasts forever, right? So, in a summary, the first two things come to my mind are those two items that I think I would love to get some help from the government, I believe, to assist people.
Okay. In our podcast today, Shoja talks about how precast is Guam's most trusted building solution. And that's true. It's been around for generations, I guess. But so is Title Guarantee. Title Guarantee has been around in Guam's real estate industry since 1963, and it's been a trusted partner for some of Guam's most significant real estate developments. And that's where we go for all our escrows, and I recommend that you do as well. Title Guarantee for all your real estate needs. Shoja, one of the things I like about you is you do have an open mind, right? But you're also quick to come to a conclusion, very decisive about it, right? So one of the conversations we've had is just about alternate building technologies, right? And so, because throughout Guam, I see Lockwood homes. There's a steel house floating around. There's modular houses. There's container developments, and there's 3D printing. And so, tell me about, as an example, a direct competitor to what you're doing, 3D printing, which is being touted. Tell me how that compares with your technology.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with 3D printing, but we have to look at the application and where are you located, and it just I don't want to get into details, but is a technology is out there, has its own limitations like anything else, but there's issues at the building code level that there is no. They just started developing a building code for it. So what building code you want to design a house, right? So you can get a permit, and then the one that came out that I was looking at it. For Guam conditions, won't let you have more than single story, and then won't let you have, because of the typhoon loads and things like that. So there are, like any other product has its own issues. But yeah, I mean, is a technology that can be better down the road in the future. But I don't think for Guam environment, for what we need to do, is the right answer.
I see. Well, what about steel? Talk to me about steel. What's your take on steel?
Yeah, steel is good. I mean, the issue with the steel is you have to worry about the rust issue. And, we have had projects that we use the stainless steel and the steel corrodes, So, again, with the steel, so there is no steel manufacturing in Guam, so it has to come from outside. And then you have to ship it. So there's additional cost for it, additional waiting time for it. And then how are you going to protect it from rust? That's another issue. And then, those are the issues comes in my mind. Other than that, I mean, it still is a good solution. But if you want to do high rise, it would be a perfect solution. And then another thing is the labor, right? So for what we are producing is kind of, in my mind, is kind of more centralized. When the product leaves our facility, is like 95% complete. So you don't need much of labor on site as far as the shell is concerned. But when you have a steel structure, you have to still, that's maybe like 20% complete. So it needs more labor. And then what we have in Guam, shortage of labor. So that goes back to the same issue. Then you have to bring more labor. But steel is not a bad option. You just need to look at what application you want to use it for. What you're trying to build. Are you building a single-story house, 2-3 bedroom, or are you building a big warehouse?
I see. Well, so the construction industry hasn't really changed much in the since 1970, right? So essentially in my lifetime, precast has been around since forever, right? Yeah. I won't even pretend that I know when they started using precast. Probably Roman times, right? There's been some revelations about the Egyptians recently.
Probably. You don't know.
So anyways, I won't date that, but what are some ways that you see technology being deployed in the construction industry that you think are promising for solving some of the problems here?
I mean, what we do at the, I would say residential level, there's not much, with the new technology. Yeah, we nowadays we're using a lot of 3D modeling, in drafting things or drawing houses, without even, building the house, you can see what this consists of, how it's laid out. Or with a 3D printer, you can make a smaller model of, plastic, precast home, but in plastic product, pre-printed. So you can show the client, this is what the house is going to look like in a scale of 110 or 120.
I see.
You see what I'm trying to say? But aside from that, I don't see, in the construction of it, there's not much of new technology, at least in Guam. The other thing is you need to look at where we are and the cost of the new technology and what you're competing with, right? So it may not be cost effective to do it here. So
I see. Well, so that's interesting in that that's the hardest part of your business, I guess.
Yeah.
That everyone wants to see what the finished product's going to look like, but you can't, right? Until it's actually finished. So being able to visualize it is actually an advantage because you get that feel and you get a lot of those kinks worked out. Because that's where I see construction going. It's like the adage in your industry is ready, shoot, aim, right? Meaning it's imprecise. But now with the adoption of technology, it's getting more precise. You're getting the ability to be more precise and being more efficient. And what you're speaking to in terms of control conditions on your site and having the infrastructure put in for the stub outs and all that stuff, all ready to go where you have the assembly. I do think that is an important approach to look at in a place where we do need attainable housing very quickly, right?
Yes.
We do need to solve these problems. And then also what you said speaks truth in terms of deploying these systems. You can deploy them here, but what is the skill of installation? What are the resources there? Because that typically is where you have the problems. The product is viable, but the installation or the capacity to support it is poor. And so that's what we see in a lot of ways too, right?
That's very true. Yeah, the local knowledge available. Now, when I was in California, we did a lot of GFRC, which is a glass reinforced concrete shells, in the high rises and the buildings in San Francisco or Northern California that use very thin concrete shell on a steel structure.
Mm-hmm.
Can you produce that in Guam? Yes, but can you install it? It's probably very hard. Skilled labor and needed to do certain things in Guam is very limited. So, yeah, you have to, again, it's like any other thing. You have to look at where are you located, what is available to you, who are you competing with, and that's how you can make a decision what would be the right answer.
Okay. Well, so if I worked with one of your existing designs, I'm assuming you have designs templated. How quickly, and I have a lot, and I want to build a house for my mother-in-law, a little two-bedroom house, right? This is hypothetical, okay? Anyways, say I wanted to do that. What do you think it would cost me for your product to build a finished house?
So it all depends. There's no magical, it's not like you can put $1 per square foot price so quickly like that. But all I can tell you is like I said before, like these 2 4-bedroom homes that we are under contract to produce and install, they're located in Jigo. And the 4-bedroom home that we are working on has 9 blocks, 9 modules. So like I said, 9 days to cast it, and then a couple of days to install it. So you need 2-3 weeks to do the shell. Mm-hmm. And then you need another maybe 2-3 weeks let's say 2 weeks to do the foundation. And then, so yeah, in a month or two, you have less than months and a half, you have from zero to a shell installed.
Right.
If you were to do that with traditional construction, it would have taken you at least 6 months or so.
True.
So, so it may cost you a little bit more, but yeah, do you want to wait 6 months to move to your house or a developer to finish the house and sell it? So that has value, right? So I think what we are trying to tell you is just, the speed and the quality, and then cost, it goes by the scale, right? So if you have one house, obviously, because we're talking about 30-ton concrete pieces, that they are very large, and we're trying to minimize the number of blocks, right? So we have a large block of concrete that has 4 walls and a roof on it, and we move it around island. So you have a lot of heavy construction equipment, cranes and things like that. So if you want to build one home versus a development that has 20 homes, so obviously there's a different cost structure. So there's no magical way I can tell you it's going to cost X dollars square foot, but if it could be lesser than traditional construction that nowadays is going on in Guam, when people building homes, or it would be very, very close to it. So
okay. Well, so I get that. I totally understand that, right? There's definitely a variable cost in site. There's a variable cost in finishing.
Yeah.
There's a variable cost in mobilization, I guess.
Yeah.
What you call it, right? And even just site location too. Well, maybe not for you because you're casting, but in construction, where you source the aggregate from is also a consideration, right?
Yeah.
In terms of cost considerations. So I get that. What if we got 20 people together and we said all those 20 people, they all have vacant lots, right?
Yeah.
Or they did parental subdivisions, right? And I said, Shoja, I want to order 22 bedrooms, right? Number 2's, the number 2 floor plan, okay?
Yeah.
And so if I got all those 20 people together and said, all these people are down with this floor plan, right? Permitting's good with it because they only got to approve the floor plan one time, right?
Yes.
So they're familiar with it down at DPW and all the other, right? Yes. The only variable is site, right? Yes. Then they could realize the economies of scale that a large-scale development would be, with the variability being obviously site work and mobilization.
Yeah.
Right. But we can come up with solutions for that too. Right?
Definitely.
Yeah, like an install date for Santa Rita or something. Right?
Definitely, definitely.
And so I think that's what it's going to take, right? I think what it's going to take is just seeing what we have as a proven solution in the market, which you do have, seeing how it can work with variable technologies, right? Steel, 3D printing. Like there's a world where we pre-print curvature, right, with a 3D concrete printer and then assemble it with your product to get more variability of design, right, and assemble it in a different way. But I think that's where the creativity comes in, right? That is where we realize the savings is speed, because most people couldn't afford that 18-month run-up. That is traditionally the construction time from permitting to completion, right? And so thank you for sharing your insights on that. But in terms of parting thoughts, what would you say your vision is for what's going to happen on Guam in the real estate and construction industry in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can complete this program and then help people to resolve this. Now, I see it all around the island, and I drive around, I see the signs, I see the people. So it kind of bothers me, right? So it's not all about money. It's not all about it's just you trying to be part of this, the community, right? You want to give back to community. That's on bottom of my heart. I believe in that. So yeah, what I wanted to help people so it's such a simple thing. People make it so complicated. It's not a very complicated problem, right? You have the right solution, and you get some help from the right people. And having a roof over your head is not a huge thing to ask, right? It's something safe that you have your family and kids in there. It rains, a typhoon comes, and stays together and it doesn't get into the pieces, right? So I really want to be part of the solution. I really want to help the Guam communities and to help to get something quick, safe, have their kids in there, and then not expensive, something that is reasonable and it's it can build quickly, right? So you don't need to wait 2 years to get a house done, right? So
speaking to that, they say that there is going to be a huge demand for housing, just in terms for workforce and service members. And so can your solution build multifamily?
Yeah, we can do multifamily. And obviously, you have to look at this, because of, again, where we are in Guam, the conditions and the typhoons and things like that, you want to have something that is, structurally safe. So with our model, with our solution, we have flexibility to have different thicknesses. And then, we can, based on our initial numbers, we can easily go up to 4 stories high. And then have this, and it's not rocket science. This is being done in the States. When I was in California, we did jails. We had the correction facilities built exact same way. In California, you cannot use and compete with a standard housing solution with precast, just because, have a stick frame wooden homes versus concrete, so you cannot compete. So in California, this system does not work because you cannot compete. But when we built prisons with very, very similar solution. So what I'm trying to say is in Guam, that can be used for workforce housing. We can for military housing. Is a system can be changed and developed a different way, and you can have different molds to do different things. It just is. As long as you can calc it, you can design it.
No, but even just in that, if I'm a service member and I want to build a fourplex or a duplex, I can use my VA loan to 100% finance my fourplex or duplex, and you can precast that. Yeah. And that can be on site in 25 weeks effectively, right?
Yeah. It would be very, very quick, right? Aside from the permitting and all that, like I said, each block is about 250 square feet. So if you have 10 blocks, that's 2,500 square feet. And we make a block a day. So, it doesn't take much to do a 2,500 square foot home. to fabricate it.
Right. And so for me, as a developer, if I was building inventory, I wouldn't want to build a 4,000 square foot house because I'd have to sell it for 800,000. And where's my market there, right? It costs me the mortgage payment alone would be over $5,000, right? And then how does that cash flow when fair market rent is about $2,100 for a 3-bedroom, right? But if I did that for multifamily, if I built a 4,000 square foot quadplex, and each of those is 1,000 square foot 3-bed 2-bath that you built for me in precast, I have a solution available, ready to rent in half a year.
Yes, that's where precast is going to shine, right? So you want to do that in the regular standard construction. It's going to take you forever to build it. If and first of all, it's just not going to be quick.
Right. And so when you talk about government solutions, maybe the government can help you or help the market spot zone and rapid zone properties to R2. So producers like you, because you're not the only precast producer on Guam.
No.
And so other people could come to the market with but you're the rapidly deployable solutions to take advantage of that rental market that's here and that's in demand. And there's a waiting list at Gura for people waiting for housing and just looking for safe, attainable housing for their families. And that's one way where you can build generational wealth by taking advantage of a product that's existing and tried, true, and proven on the market.
Correct, yes.
That's awesome, Shoja. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming.
No worries.
Yeah. I just wanted to say I appreciate you listening to that podcast. Shoja is all business and brass tacks. He just thinks precast is the way to go. And that's true. I mean, we don't need to reinvent the wheel to solve problems. We just need to know what solutions are available to us that we can execute. And I think we can still be creative using old technology. And I think Shoja's right. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. And that's how we should approach it. And I think we should ask why more often we do things. But sometimes the answer is it's the best way. And so if you're looking to find answers and find solutions to problems, join us here. Give us a like, a subscribe, a share, and join us as we ask the questions that need to get answered to solve problems and hopefully come up with some good ideas to move forward with. Thanks to you for all your support, and we look forward to seeing you here on future episodes.